Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to 18.1 Launch Week and our second webinar, What's New in Winforms and WPF, presented by DevExpress Technical Evangelist Paul Usher and DevExpress CTO Julian Bucknall. In this session, they'll explore our newest desktop components and features set to ship as part of 18.1. All right, thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Julian and Paul.
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning, everyone. Now, today's our second webinar in an exciting What's New series of presentations. And of course, today I have Julian with me. So good morning, Julian.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to, as Paul says and Amanda says, What's New in 18.1, the second webinar. It's my second webinar too. So without further ado, I think we should kick off and see what's new for desktop programming.
Busy week all ahead. Okay, jump in with a couple of frequently asked questions. I'll present on some Winforms, and Julian, I'll get you to do WPF. It is going to be a little bit fast-paced. We have got a large number of things to try and get through. There'll be some items that I cover that include both Winforms and WPF and vice versa. There's also a couple of items that we'll talk about that we won't actually have time for a full demo. Question number one, when will it be available? That is the million-dollar question at the moment. The answer to the question is soon. Julian, want to expand on that?
It's very soon. I mean, we're kind of expecting it any moment, kind of thing. But the teams are doing their last-minute testing, last-minute fixes, last-minute checking the install, and all this kind of groovy stuff that has to happen before you release a product. As I say, we're expecting it any moment. It's not there yet, but stay tuned.
And of course, on top of all that, everything that's going on in the world at the moment with GDPR also has an impact that people wouldn't necessarily think about as a tool vendor.
In fact, that's exactly true. GDPR comes in on the 25th of May, and we've had to do an awful lot over the past 6-9 months or something like that to prepare us and our customers ready for this new European Union regulation. And I'm sure everybody here has been getting nice privacy notices from major computer and software manufacturers about
everybody
their data. Anyway, moving right on from GDPR, because it's not about that.
Where do I get the update? If you've been across to devexpress.com in the last few weeks, you would have seen our sexy new website. It's certainly a lot easier to find information on the site. To get access to your downloads, look at the top right-hand part of the screen where it says My Downloads. Click on the link, and if you're not already logged in, you'll be prompted for your DevExpress account details. Put the information in, accept the terms of use and privacy statement, and log in. Of course, if you have forgotten your password, you can do a reset using the link. Once you're in there, you will see a list of all of the subscriptions that you have. Now, on my list, we can see that I'm currently running the 18.1.2 beta that was released on the 24th of April. And if you're a universal customer, then you have access to that. It's been a lot of fun working with it and seeing the new changes. From there, download the file, install it. Next question is always, can I run it side by side? I highly recommend that you do. Across all the major versions, whether it be 17.1, 17.2, 18.1, you can install side by side. You can switch your projects between those versions quite easily. And I always think it's worthwhile taking a branch of your code and just seeing if there are any breaking changes with your project. And of course, the support team are always there to help. So talking of upgrading, how do I do that and what actually happens? Well, you run the project converter. This is the 18.1.2 version, and point it to the folder where your source code is located. I highly recommend leaving the create backup file option turned on and hit upgrade all. You can also do collections of projects. Effectively, or the what happens part of that is we update the resource file to point to the correct version of the library. We update the project file. We in no way modify your source code. We don't go through your designer files and start changing properties or your source code and start looking for events, etc. So it's a really safe thing to do, and you can migrate your project between different versions really quite easily. So what's new in Winforms for version 18.1? Well, there's a number of changes happened for all the different controls. Now, there's no new control been introduced, but there's certainly a lot going on behind the scenes. And we started out in the week when we were rehearsing for today, and basically we found that there was like 20 slides worth of information, and we decided to ditch that and get straight into the demos themselves. But you can see from this slide, there's a lot of things being touched. Some of the things worth mentioning here is the high DPI support, and also some products have got support for DirectX added. The Svg icons have been introduced to a number of products. Julian will talk about why you should use Svg when we get to that section, and a number of behind-the-scene enhancements. But now what we'll do is bring up the demo center and start taking a look. I'm going to run the 18.1 demo center, and of course, being Winforms, I'll be spending my time inside the Winforms area. If you're not familiar with this particular page, you can look at the demos by list or by group, and you'll see that I use the search option quite regularly. The first thing that I want to touch on is charting. And there's a couple of things with charts we want to do. The team have put together some new customization, and with that I mean that you can look at custom units of measure and also custom aggregate features and some custom colors for automatically generated series. So let's take a look at the color ones first, and then I'll jump over to a Visual Studio project to show you the others. We can see here that the series have been automatically assigned different palette colors. So straight away, it's more aesthetically pleasing when you're looking through different charts. Now, the actual binding can be done via a key color colorizer, assigning the actual color from a palette to the series by series data member value. Or you could actually set up a data source colorizer, binding the color to an extra data source, which links it to the series via a series data member value. I've got a couple of different demos inside Visual Studio that I'm going to run. Now, what I want to show you here is the custom units of measurement. And if I go to the financial chart up here, you'll see that here we've got a stock standard candlestick chart. You'll notice, and I want to just call out some of the updates that have happened to the crosshair, so enhancements. Now, in this release, the crosshair has been extended to allow you to display values of series points that are selected by the crosshair in the legend. You've got the fact that the crosshair will follow the mouse cursor simultaneously. That's both horizontal and vertical if you've got it turned on. You can actually now display the crosshair in the when you export the chart or print the chart, and you've got the ability to display any data source field within the crosshair's cursor label, which is quite nice. Some of these features, some of the team have done really nice blog posts about as well. So, for example, Oliver did a couple of posts on charting and goes into a lot more detail than I've got time for. But you'll notice on this right-hand side, we've got the unit of measure. Now, typically, 1 minute, 1 hour would be a standard unit of measure. And when it comes to time value, you can now specify a custom unit. So here we've got the 5, the 15 minutes, and the 4 hour. So when I apply that, you can see that the chart's updated to that custom unit of measure. One thing to note, that if you're looking to use, or if you're currently using working day or working time, this feature will not be available in that scenario. Now, the next thing I want to do for charts is take a look at the custom aggregates feature. It could be that you've got a particular set of data. Now, this chart itself is just stock standard bar chart with some time represented. But what's important is how we are doing the binding or the custom aggregate feature behind the scenes. If I just jump into the code, we'll see that in the initializer, we're coming through and setting the custom aggregate function, this new class called medium aggregate function. And if we look at this class quickly, we can see that it implements the custom aggregate class, and that we've got a calculation method that's doing, in this case, just a medium calculation and returning that. But implementing your own custom aggregate functions is now that simple. Inherit from this custom class and then apply it on your initialization. Another feature that I'm going to show a simple version of is the multi-select. Now if you've got a lot of points on screen and you want the user to be able to select those points, you can do an elastic band style select. Use the control key and click and drag, and whatever is inside that capture area will be automatically selected. Now during that process you do have the ability of cancelling that via the selection change event handler and just setting the cancel property to true. One thing to note as well is that any 2D charts have got the option of DirectX rendering, which increases performance dramatically, especially over large volumes of points. From charting, I want to jump over to the data grid. So I'm going to come into my demo area and just type in grid, and we'll show all demos on the data grid section. Something that is a feature in the What's New list, but is incorporated in all our demos, is the splash form, or the, I'm trying to think of the actual term we're using technically, the overlay weight form. And you'll notice as I switch between certain demos, you get that nice little weight panel taking over. Now that's a function that is available inside that you can bind not only to the form, but you can also bind it directly to one control. So it could be that you're wanting a control to show that it's updating, but not block anything else. Now what's important to remember here is that it's a semi-transparent splash screen. It runs on a background thread, preventing access to a particular control or a form, but it's never going to block your main thread in that sense. As I said, you can bind it to any control, not just the main UI, and you can resize and move the main form while that's visible, so you're not locked into any kind of UI blocking. You've got multiple animation options as well as custom painting mechanism, and it's a really nice way of letting users know something's happening without actually locking them down to a non-responsive UI. What I want to show now is the infinite scrolling, and this is a great feature where you may not have, or you've got a data source that is infinite by nature, or it might be a web service where you don't actually get told how many records are going to be available, or just a really large data set that you want to allow the user to scroll through. It's a feature that's been available in our web components for a while, and I particularly like it because I'm not a fan of pager controls. But what we can see here is I've got a million rows in my grid, and as I use the elevator to scroll through, you'll see every now and then the grid itself will just do a call forward for some data and just load the next batch of data. So very, very powerful, nice way not to have to give the user a paging option, especially if you don't know the record count. Not so long ago we introduced a web view style or a web style row selection method into the grid control, and that's where you've got a checkbox to actually say that you wanted to use or select a particular row. Now that column itself is not a bound column. It wasn't something that was part of your data set. It was a nice way to allow them to go through and select items. Well, with version 18.1, what you can now do is bind that selection to a data source. And in essence, what that means is that the information is going to be persisted, so it's going to stay in state through sessions of, say, filtering or grouping, or whether you want to persist that back and for the next time something gets loaded for whatever reason. It's just nice that you can now bind that selection directly to a data source. While we're inside the grid editor, I want to just show you some of the enhancements to the filtering. So I'm going to bring up the filter control. Now the filter control itself is one of the controls that now supports the SVG images. So you'll notice, as with, or default now for a lot of our controls, is that you've got SVG icons. You can disable the default behavior and go back to raster, but Julian will then probably knock on your door and ask you why. The filter control itself, let's find the right notes here. You like the idea of going and visiting people, Julian?
Absolutely. I've got a t-shirt already. Use SVG or else.
Now, the filter editor enhancements, we've introduced a tab UI. It's got syntax highlighting, autocomplete, and expression validation and error indication. What do I mean by that? Well, not only can I use the usual top section to come through and visually add different elements. If I'm working inside this area, as I start typing, it's going to give me that autocomplete. My options right now, I can either do and or. So I'll select and. Straight away, I get a pop-up of available columns and or all of the functions available to the filter control. On top of that, if I try and exit out of there, we're going to see I've got a syntax error. So very powerful helpers along the way when you're working with the filter control. We'll jump out and look at some of the updates to data editors. I'll jump in and say show all demos. First thing I want to display here is the new calendar view for the date edit. Now this applies to the date edit as well as the calendar control itself. You'll notice traditionally we've got this style, obviously depends on the skin you're using here, but I can now change my calendar view from default and select the classic new view. When I do that, we have this really nice Outlook-esque or Outlook-inspired for Outlook 2016 drop down of a calendar. Things like that, as far as features or enhancements, are important when you're designing a UI and you're using a lot of controls and you're trying to mimic some of the Microsoft styles. And ultimately the reason we do that is because it breeds familiarity. People are already used to using a Microsoft-based product. They can switch to your product with a lot of comfort because you've got that same look and feel that you're delivering inside your application. Next thing I want to look at is the color edit or the color pick edit. And we introduced the loop a few versions ago. In this update, there's been some changes to the loop, or some, not changes, but enhancements. And one of the things you can now do when you zoom, and this is always tricky to do on a touchpad, but you'll see that we've introduced a pixel grid allowing you to distinguish individual pixels easily. The other thing that you can do is use the control key, and that will snap you to the individual pixels in the grid, which makes selecting your pixel or your color a lot easier. So you're not trying to get that precision just with your mouse. I know that if I'm working on, well, any type of application where I've got to find colors, it's a great little tool to use. And then the final thing I want to show inside the data editors is the list box control. You've asked for it, the team's delivered, you start typing a word or what you're searching for, and it will automatically highlight that inside that list box control. Now back in version 17.2, pretty sure it was 2, we released the preview of our file dialogues or our dialog controls. And at the time, a lot of people asked the question, why has it taken so long? Are we just skinning the standard Microsoft COM dialogues? And the answer is no, we're not. These things have been built to be skinnable by our controls, and there's a lot of work involved in that, because it's not just a matter of looking at doing a directory or a listing as to what folders or files are inside a particular directory, but we've got to think about things like network shares, SMB drives, or different file systems that have to be supported. So at the end of the day, a lot of work has gone in, but in this release, they are now moving from the preview into fully fledged options. So if I choose a file open dialog or the load document, we can see that showing the current skin. It features all the different views that you'd be used to inside a standard file dialog, detail list view, etc. Full support for filtering, sorting. Now what I'm going to do is drop out of here and change the skin. I'm going to choose the Bezier or Bezier, and
Bezier.
Yes, you can pick on my French, lack of French pronunciation of Julian. And I'm going to choose this one. Won't even try and pronounce it. So now when I bring up that load dialog, we can see that the skinning has changed exactly to what we want, including every little element. So before this was a small horizontal slider, we've now got the little button or the disk instead. And that carries across, or if we load a document, that carries across the save dialog and also the folder dialog. And of course, all of the options behind the scenes, the same as you had with the standard Windows API, which is multiple selection, filter options, read-only, all of the key functionality. I do just also want to call out another feature while I'm in here. I changed the skin before. We've made it a little bit easier to work through the skins. You'll now see this options dialog, and you can go through and you can turn on or off different skin styles to make it a little less, I was going to say complicated, not really the right word, but less busy for your users if you don't want to use specific skins. I said there are a lot of little things that are included in this update that are just hidden, and it's an interesting concept to try and find demos that we can pull those out for. While we're sitting here, we've added high DPI support. So we've enhanced the DirectX rendering support. We've improved scaling of the control elements, borders, indents, and images across our entire Winforms product line. We have, if you're using the image collection control, we've added a new action to the smart tag, which allows you to convert the image collection to a DPI-aware image collection. We've introduced Svg Icons by default to the scheduler control, the filter editor, the layout view, and the PDF viewer. So you'll see if you open those now, they'll be using our Svg Icons. If you want to revert back to the previous, the raster version, you can simply use the allow default SVG images option to disabled. Again, be careful for the knock on the door by Julian. So we've covered the skins, the data editors, data grid, grouping. Now there's a new group style. So I'm going to look at the auto layout demo and go to group styles. This one screen encapsulates the different views or styles that group panels can utilize. Here you've got a traditional group panel where you've got your border, you've got your text sitting inside the border. You've got two options of that. Here you've got a panel window, or what you'd expect to see if you're going to be using docking, etc. And then on the left-hand side, you've got the new title style, which is something that, used in the right way, really makes your form pop. It gets rid of borders, but still provides a lot of nice functionality. And of course, here we've got the ability to collapse. That's just a feature, as with any of the groups, that you can turn on or off. And to just highlight the different group styles, we've got the title style, the light style, and the card style. Moving along now to maps. A couple of really, really nice features inside maps. I'll go show all demos. The first one that I want to highlight, which I'll use the weather demo for. I certainly think there's better places to be than Brisbane at the moment, because we're in the middle of winter, or heading into winter, and it's getting quite chilly. When you look at a world map, typically this is what we would see. The Americas on the left, the rest of the world in the middle, and Australia, New Zealand, bottom right-hand corner. But of course, the world's not flat. That's another debate Julian and I can have offline. But instead, what we'd expect is if I start scrolling to the right, I can actually get this new feature, which is a circular scroll. So we can see that the Americas come back around, and now we can see a different perspective for when I travel between Brisbane over here to our office in LA. It's a flight over the Pacific. It's not having to go the long way around. Although I do remember one time somebody said to me when I explained it was a 12 or 13-hour flight, they said, well, why don't you stop somewhere on the way? And unfortunately, there's not a lot of places that we can put down between here and there. Circular scrolling works both ways, and it's a great way to work with your maps. The next feature I want to call out is the map editor. I had a customer contact me recently. He was working on his franchise business and wanted to do this exact thing, which was draw areas or draw shapes on his map to nominate regions for different franchises. Here we've got an example showing a hotel resort map, but you can see the way that it's been utilized. You've got a legend, and then you've got different elements that's been drawn on top of the map. And to just demonstrate how easy that is to work with, I'm going to actually just set up a quick one now. I'm going to come over to the toolbar, and I'm going to say I want to add a path. And it could be that this area is an indoor go-kart area. So I'm just going to click my points, and I can do as many or as little points as I want, come through, and then finish it like so, and I've now got another area that I can work with, and you can see how it works with zoom. I can change the fill, the stroke. Now, the vector items that you can edit, we provide the toolbar that gives you quick access to the most common editor functions. You can add new vector elements being a push pin, a path, a polyline, a simple dot, ellipse, rectangle, or line. You can select an existing item. You can edit, transform, add, remove, or move points. We provide a undo and redo feature on the toolbar. And once your user has edited that information, you can then save that out or persist that data to a shapefile or an SVG or a KML file. Using the editor, you can edit or delete vertices. You can just everything that you'd expect to be able to draw and manipulate on your map. Now, the functionality is available with both a geographical or the Cartesian coordinate system, and works also with our newly introduced circular scrolling feature. So that's, I think, by far one of my most favorite things with this update. Moving along to the Adorner. I always think I'm saying that word wrong. This is going to be the desktop UI manager, show all demos. If we jump down to the badges. So you've now got the ability of adding badges to your control. In this example, we can say we want the target element to be a particular page, or we can actually apply it directly to the panel control itself. All the usual options you get to go through, set your specific text colors, whether you want to show an image color, what offset you want, so you could turn around, just move this up or down and do the X and Y offset. So you get to position it exactly where you want, making it look and feel really nice inside your UI. The vertical grid, or actually the properties grid. I know that over the years, introducing a property grid into your application, that there's some real unique uses for it. But in this example, using the diagram control, we can see that we've got the properties on the right-hand side. What's really nice in this with this release is the fact that the property grid itself has been given a flat look. So it's moved away from that traditional gritty rows and columns style. I mean, effectively, that's still what is being built on, but you've got the ability to then organize categories into separate groups. You've got the option of the advanced value editing for numeric processes. So as I scroll down here, you've got slider controls as well as the traditional data inputs. I want to talk briefly about the scheduler control. I know that Julian's going to show you some of the features on there, but what I want to mention is the new storage mechanism. So the existing schedule storage object has been replaced with a scheduler data storage. Some of the things that allows you to do is you can set labels and statuses by their own data sources out of the box. The storage isn't reloaded after each change with the underlying data source, so performance benefits. There's a number of background things as to the way that events are fired. You can, there's no longer a requirement to use begin update and end update when you're working with it. And the new storage engine correctly recognizes any modifications that are happening at a data source level. Don't panic. The schedule storage will still continue to be supported for backwards compatibility purposes. It's not like it's a huge breaking change and your application is going to stop working. Couple of things before I switch over to Julian. I want to mention the PDF control. It's got huge performance boost. We've introduced DirectX rendering as a beta. We've got support for all text rendering modes. We've got the high quality text rendering. We've got support for all blend modes, and the demo that comes in the demo center will let you jump through and have a look at all those. There's changes to the tree list control, which Julian's going to show. There's one demo that I was really sort of disappointed that I couldn't show. My laptop's not running the latest version of the Windows Spring Creator Update or whatever Microsoft are calling it, but we've now got a Fluent design form. I'm going to show you the hamburger menu in just 1 second, but it'll inspired by Microsoft's Fluent design system. It allows you to utilize the hamburger menu. It's got an adaptive layout. It's utilizing the acrylic material. Now that's the one where certain parts of your form can show a partial transparent texture and give it that really nice look as to what's behind it that you'll see in a lot of Microsoft products. And it also features a reveal highlight. So the acrylic material and reveal highlight are only available if you're running the Windows 10 Spring Creators Update. What a mouthful. So hamburger. Again, Oliver on his blog post goes into a lot of detail on this particular feature, but the hamburger menu, which has been introduced on the accordion control. See here we've got the accordion control. One of the things you can do is simply click on the little hamburger, and this is just one of the views that's supported for the layout. Effectively, you can change the display mode option. You can have overlay. You can have the inline. So inline is pretty much what we're seeing here. You can have the minimal view. Now, minimal is similar to overlay, but it leaves you with just the hamburger menu. But it's a great thing to see as we move forward. And I'm finding that a lot of Winforms or a lot of desktop design elements are now being brought to light because of what's happening inside a web design environment. We're seeing a lot of things filtered down from the web thinking, hey, this is cool, let's see it inside desktop applications. The last thing I want to show you is inside Visual Studio, and that is with your Winforms projects now, you can right click, you have a new project settings option. This allows you to have a design time experience for all of your DevExpress project settings. So for example, your skin, you can quickly just set the default skin you want for your application. You can nominate the default font details, whether you want to use DirectX in your application, whether you want it to be DPI aware, and if you're using the touch options, what scale factor you want. So it's nice just having that functionality available straight inside there. And with that, Julian, I think I'll swap over to you if you want to grab the screen.
And you should see my screen, which was exactly the same as yours. Hey, we rehearsed this. Anyway, WPF. As in previous releases, and especially recently, we've pretty much concentrated on improving and enhancing the current controls with version 18.1 of the DevExpress WPF suite instead of adding new controls. And I'd have to say the team has done some major new enhancements and tweaks this time around. So much so, I will have to miss some of them. We're already almost 40 minutes in. And plus, in a webinar like this, a picture or at least a demo is worth 1,000 words. The list you see there are all the controls and features that have been changed in version 18.1 that have improvements. There is one new feature, though, that is entirely code-driven, and any visual demo I could give would not give it justice. That feature is called Virtual Data Sources, and it's available for the WPF data grid. Now, I'm sure you already know the grid already supports server mode, and that was built to cater for the majority case, data in some big database engine, especially one of the big ones like SQL Server and so on. Here, the grid deliberately allows you to process data requests on the server. However, if you don't use one of the data sources we support, you've been out of luck. Enter virtual data sources. In essence, this is an interface to some data. You are responsible for writing the implementation of that interface for your specific data source. This means you can connect to web services through REST and all the rest of them. NoSQL databases, databases we don't have interfaces for with server mode, and so on. The only API you need to support with virtual data sources is to return the top N records. We don't need the total record count or sorting or filtering. That's not required, and so on and so forth. You can specify which data operations are allowed. So sorting by certain columns only, the ability to filter using starts with, and so on and so forth. And you can use async operations if needed. With virtual data sources, the grid can display data page by page or via infinite scrolling. Now, as I said earlier, this feature is not really visual in nature, so I'll leave it there for now. We shall be publishing a blog post in a few days that describes this new feature in more detail. Now, again, as is usual, there is an awful lot of commonality in the improvements between Winforms and WPF, and indeed, those have crept into ASP.NET as well. That's because we've, if you like, revamped our teams internally to fix on what I may exaggerate as cross-platform controls. By that, I think you could think of a control as being some kind of, I don't know, engine-like code that gets or calculates data or values for some control, as well as some kind of rendering logic that shows it on the screen. The former you could view as being cross-platform, the latter as being platform-specific. I hasten to add that I'm being extremely simplistic here, but just think of things like the spreadsheet control or rich text editor and all of those Office-related controls, which are very large controls. Now, a simple example, if I may call it that, is charts. And like ASP.NET and like Winforms, the WPF charts now have custom units of measurement, custom aggregate functions, crosshair cursor enhancements, all of those things that Paul just showed you, so there's no real point in showing them again. However, since I am talking about charting, we've added a new chart option. The ability to specify that you only want to see individual data points for the top N values and to aggregate the remainder as a single point labeled others. So here we have area of the countries of the world, and we're just showing the top 5. So Russia Federation, Canada, United States, China, Brazil, and everything else gets, if you like, lumped, aggregated into the others part. I can change it easily, show more of the top 10 in this particular case, and you could get the idea pretty quickly about top N. Sometimes it's well worth it. You don't have to try and calculate the others bit yourself. Next up is the Accordion and the new navigation pane, and here it is. This navigation pane mode allows you to create essentially an Outlook-inspired sidebar panel and integrate it with our Office navigation bar control. So as you see, we have an accordion, and just like Outlook, we have a list of different items we can display in the pane underneath as textual buttons, essentially. However, we now have this new navigation option called Compact Navigation, where in this mode, the accordion control only displays the selected group content, which we have here, mail, and other groups as buttons along the bottom here. So we're showing mail, I can show the calendar, I can show some contacts, for example, and if I shrink the accordion, the pane, and there we go, the extra groups appear along with the shrunk accordion. Next up is thick band separators. Woo. And let me go to the banded view of the data grid. So in this release, the data grid and the tree list controls can display thick band separators. Let's bring it up, and here we have what we're talking about. We have some thicker band separators here, thicker separators between this set of data and this set of data. In essence, this is an ideal way to help your users visualize data, to be able to fix on the data that's important. So I can unshow them so you can see what I mean by having the thicker band separators. This all kind of merges together, whereas if I have the separators, boom, it becomes more visible, if you like. You can specify the separator color and thickness, and in fact you can specify different appearance settings for both the root and the nested band separators. So we have a darker gray here, and we have a lighter gray here. While we're here, the WPF data grid and tree list controls now offer a best fit option for band headers. Best fit calculates and applies the optimal width required for a band to fully display its contents, and that's switchable by the end users or by the API. Next up, quickly to show that like on Winforms, file dialogues have now been released out of CTP, and where they were in 17.2, and now they're available as part of the product, fully released. New enhancements here, we have the usual kind of breadcrumbs that you see on, quote, normal file dialogues or common file dialogues, and using the open file dialog, you can select folders, you can create a new folder just like Paul was showing you, so I could create a new folder here, and we've also added localization support to this particular feature as well. Let's take now a quick look at the scheduler. And here I'm going to be talking about a community technology preview of our new resource tree control. Now, as its name implies, the control displays scheduler resource items. Here we are. We have these different calendars, if you like, they're resources, using a tree UI-like metaphor. So we have a tree, we have a group here of my calendars, a group here of work calendars. Now, the features include the ability to, say, create another group. So let's do home stuff. And under that, I'm going to add a new calendar. I don't know, lawn boy. I've got this on my mind at the moment. Our lawns are growing. So notice as I've done this, and I press enter, the resource now appears in the day view. I didn't do anything to make it appear. It's just there. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 resources, my calendar, birthdays, team calendar, now Lawn Boy. And I can start doing things like, moving appointments or creating a new appointment in all of the usual ways for that particular resource. I can do other things as well with this resource tree control. I can move things around just by drag and drop. And obviously I can do things like, I don't delete it. I don't want that anymore. So, and it has built-in search support as well. And notice we're going to go on about this, or I am going to go on about this. The scheduler control now uses SVG icons, as should everybody. Let's move on to the spreadsheet now.
I wonder if you can get an SVG pie chart.
Oh, no way, Jose. Although it's fairly easy to do. SVG, after all, is just a drawing language. Anyway, spreadsheet. Let's open that up. Now, big thing for both Winforms and WPF in this release is the support for shapes. And over here, I'm going to drag in a program which you may already know. It's Excel. And in this particular spreadsheet that I have here, I've added a few shapes. And it's fairly easy to do. Illustration, shapes. Let's do a heart. Do a heart, and I'm going to draw it just here. And let's make it fairly colorful. We'll move it around. I'll put it there. I don't know. And I'm going to save this now. So I've saved that. Bye-bye Excel. And now I'm going to open that exact same file with our spreadsheet control. There it is. And boom, there's my little heart. And we have now shape support within the spreadsheet control. This happens in Winforms as well. We'll support all the shapes types that you possibly just saw in Excel. You can move and resize and remove shapes. Worksheets with shapes can also be printed and exported to PDF. Now, the same as is with Winforms, let me just move over here a little bit. We've simplified formula construction. So let me just put in a few numbers here. I'm not really bothered about it. Oh, and I really would like to find the average. Is it the average or is it the mean? Maybe it's and we simplified formula construction. Our spreadsheet control now supports formula autocomplete. So it can help prevent spelling or syntax errors by providing this list of function names, define names and table names that match the characters I've already typed. So average, I just press tab and then I can select, oh, I just want this and close off, and the average was 24.2. So that's the new features with the spreadsheet control. Now, along with all of these new enhancements and features that I've briefly shown you, there have been performance improvements pretty much across the board. This is something we do every single release anyway, but I'd like to bring up some examples here for 18.1. The data editors that use source collections, so combo box edit, lookup edit, list box edit, no longer process or download the entire source collection at startup. Data editors traverse through source items until the selected item is found. Significantly improved startup time if you have those forms with lots of editors bound to large source collections. Data grid, data summary and conditional formatting rules calculated much faster. Optimized summary recalculations to restrict those calculations to items that have been affected by a property change, and the data grid now does not recalculate total summaries when you resort the data because they won't change. Data grid and tree list, we've improved the scrolling speed. docking UI, performance enhancements, basically to render dock panels faster. There's a new option, the logical tree structure, which allows panel content to remain in the same logical tree, preventing redundant updates. And I'm sure you all know about WPF and logical trees, visual trees. This makes dock panels dock and undock up to 2 times faster, and restore layout is also significantly faster. Pivot Grid has not been left alone. We'll continue to improve the Pivot Grid's various features, including this time in-memory data processing. Following features are now processed by the Pivot Grid in optimized mode. We have drill down and unbound expressions. Another set of enhancements, I'm going to bang on about this forevermore. We have more Svg icons across the controls. And another, the Spreadsheet and RTF editor now automatically recognize the format of a document without actually relying on the file extension. And finally, I'd just like to reiterate there are many more tweaks and enhancements to the WPF controls, mainly non-visual, that I've been able to show here, essentially. For example, APIs have been enhanced here and there, and so on. So my advice, as always, is to check out the what's new for the controls you use on a daily basis to see where the enhancements have been made and what they'll mean to you and your apps. And with that, it's question time. Paul?
That it is. Yes. No, I'll take these. Okay, so running through the questions, Julian. Will the multi-select feature on the charts that Paul showed be available for the chart item in dashboards? Unfortunately, not at this time. The charts inside dashboards work slightly differently. Is the scroll bar annotations supported for extra grid? Not at this time. These are all things that the teams have on their wish list boards. Any chance that the checkbox selector functionality would be added to the banded grid view? Not at this point, or not at this time, unfortunately. We're going to find some positive questions, Julian.
Well, yeah.
The combo box control, can they be binding, or can you add binding to the data source? So for the combo box edit, you can populate using the items collection, which you can bind. So you can bind the lookup edit, the grid lookup edit, or the search lookup edit to data, or you could write a little helper to populate the items collection from a data source. Melik asks, are we able to change contrast of image brightness? Are we able to change the contrast of the image's brightness? Unfortunately not. I'm not quite sure which control that was relating to, but the team answer was unfortunately not. Can you add badges to navbar items, or is it just tab pages? This applies to the navbar control as well. Just select that as your target element and then show the badges for any items using the offset properties. Somebody was asking about changes to the pivot grid, which I didn't get to. Now, for the pivot grid, the performance enhancements, there's some in-memory data processing enhancements for drill down and unbound expressions, and you now have the ability of printing row headings on every page, and the Excel-inspired filter has been improved. Users can now filter grouped data. Got an ongoing question regarding multi-user functionality with EJ. So that's a complicated question about if you've got multiple users on the schedule, can you introduce a blocking feature to say, think of doctor surgery, 2 receptionists, and they both want to take the same appointment. So looking to the team to help with this one. I don't believe that that functionality is available out of the box for that scenario, but you could, lots of different answers to how you could implement that depending on the use. The There's a couple of people asking about where they can find all the details for the What's New, and so on the YouTube link we will put that link to the What's New page. Somebody just asked, any changes to spreadsheet control? Just the ones that Julian highlighted there, which is the autocomplete on the formulas, the syntax highlighting, and the shape, the ability to read documents with shapes and manipulate those shapes. A question, has loading speed for dictionaries been improved in the RTF editor by Richard? Richard, I'm not personally aware of any speed issues with dictionaries, so short answer is there's nothing on the What's New document regarding dictionaries, but if there is a problem then please reach out to the support team. Why does Julian recommend Svg Icons?
Because they are drawn for you. So on, like my system here has, I've got a laptop with a very high resolution screen. It's almost 4K. And then I have two external monitors, which are not. They're 1920 by 1200 or something like that. Displaying a raster icon so it looks good on the low DPI screen would be pixelated on the high DPI screen, and so on and so forth. With SVG, the icon or the drawing is actually drawn there and then, so it respects the various DPIs. It's just,
again, the answer's in the word vector, isn't it? It's resizable.
Absolutely. Yes, scalable vector graphics, SVG.
Okay. Any changes to the WPF map control? Not at this time in 18.1. Enhancements to extra reports come to the dashboards and reporting webinar on Thursday for the most of the world, Friday for me. Do we have plans to develop a WPF Gantt chart? That's a deep question. Nothing that's directly on the planning board at the moment. We're getting some nice feedback on the website. Context menu on diagram control from David. Does that mean you're looking for one, David? Or
don't know.
Not quite sure. Not quite sure what the question is.
My clock is chiming.
Yeah, I know my time's running out. So the last couple of questions are enhancements to PDF viewer didn't include the export to XLSX. They were performance-based and the DirectX rendering. And question of, do we have live support? We have pre-sale support, but the support center, so you shouldn't need to send emails back and forth. The support center is a fantastic resource and the team generally respond quite quickly. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to hand back to Amanda now.
And that is it for this one. Thank you so much to Paul and Julian. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.